So to kick us off, my name is Kathy, and I am a co-chair of the Conference Program Committee at CSBC. I'm also a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia in the Genome Science and Technology Program.
Et mon nom est Kim Santerre, je suis coprésidente du Comité des francophiles du CSPC et je suis également gestionnaire du réseau de thérapie cellulaire tissulaire et génique du Québec.
Before we begin, we respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We honor their enduring connection to this land, its waters, and communities. As we meet here for this national conference, we also recognize the contributions, histories, and resilience of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples across Canada, from coast to coast.
Nous rendons hommage à la richesse de ces cultures et à leur rôle essentiel dans l'histoire et le présent de notre pays. Nous sommes reconnaissants de pouvoir nous réunir, apprendre et collaborer ici, sur ces terres, dans un esprit de respect, d'humilité et de réconciliation.
This year, our conference is focused on Toward a Resilient Future for Canada, mobilizing science, knowledge, and innovation.
Nous sommes très fiers de vous présenter une programmation de plus de 50 panels qui mettent en lumière plus de 300 panélistes qui sont prêts à partager et à débattre autour de nos six grands thèmes.
And for those of you who have registered, you are in for a treat with the unforgettable gala dinner kicking off the conference tonight.
N'hésitez pas à aller à la rencontre de notre fantastique équipe de bénévoles et d'employés sans qui cette conférence ne pourrait être le succès annuel qu'elle est.
Additionally, those who have been to the conference previously will know that CSPC publishes a magazine. It's full of insightful commentary, and if you pick one up and flip to page 74, you'll see me.
Si vous souhaitez en savoir davantage sur les réflexions de Cathy ou pour découvrir les autres sujets du magazine, n'hésitez pas à vous procurer une copie de l'édition 2025 à l'accueil.
And now, a few quick housekeeping notes to make sure you get the most out of your CSPC experience. Again, this year, all panels offer simultaneous translation and closed captions in both English and French through Interprify. You can simply scan the QR code available in your sessions room, download the Interprify app, and select your language. Just remember to use your own device and headphones, or you can read the transcripts on your phone. If you have any trouble using the app, just stop by the registration desk for assistance.
Afin de rendre le contenu de la conférence accessible pour tous, nous offrons le service de traduction simultanée et de sous-titres via l'application Interprify. Si vous pouvez y avoir accès en scannant le code QR qui est disponible dans chacune des salles de session. Si vous avez besoin d'assistance avec l'application, n'hésitez pas à demander à quelqu'un de notre équipe.
And we also have the CSPC mobile app. You can download it on the App Store or Google Play to explore sessions, speakers, and get all of the latest updates. You will need to search for CSPC 2025.
Aucune version papier du programme n'est disponible. L'application mobile sera votre meilleur ami pour les prochains jours. C'est également à partir de cette application mobile que vous pourrez répondre au sondage de satisfaction à la fin de chacune des sessions.
And finally, we want all of your friends and colleagues back home to be super jealous of your CSPC experience. So make sure to take lots of pictures and use the hashtag CSPC2025 throughout the conference on social media.
N'hésitez pas à partager vos coups de cœur et vos réflexions tout au long de la conférence en utilisant le hashtag CSPC 2025 sur les réseaux sociaux.
And finally, if you are registered for the gala dinner tonight, you should have received an email with your seating assignment. If you have not, make your way to the help desk sometime this afternoon to retrieve it.
Joignez-vous à nous dès 17h15 pour la réception célébrant la francophonie, tout juste avant le gala qui débutera à 18h30 tapant. Si vous n'êtes pas certain de votre numéro de table, n'hésitez pas à venir nous voir à l'accueil.
And now, we'd like to welcome to the stage Mehrdad Hariri, the visionary behind this conference and the president and CEO of CSPC.
always we should begin with a big round of applause for CSPC volunteers, please. Bon après-midi, bonjour les invités distincts, chers collègues, chers amis. C'est avec grand plaisir qu'au nom de toute l'équipe de CPC, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la 17e conférence sur la politique scientifique canadienne. Après presque un an de travail, nous sommes de retour pour une autre conférence passionnante. Close to 100 volunteers, CSPC staff, CSPC board members, award selection committee members, event planning team, nearly 50 panel organizers, close to 300 speakers, and countless of others who offered their advice, support, and time whenever I called them. I want to thank all of you for this. But there are two important groups that I want to especially recognize. First, you, all the conference delegates. What makes this conference truly special is you, a mix of expertise and perspectives, researchers and policymakers, industry, academic, and community leaders, young professionals and seasoned experts from coast to coast to coast. You bring the energy, ideas, and diversity that makes CSPC the beating heart of Canada's science and innovation policy dialogue. Secondly, the conference partners. I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our conference partners. Their generous financial support has been instrumental in making this event possible. Truly, without your contribution, this would not have been possible. So I want to ask you, please join me in offering a sincere, heartfelt round of applause to all the partners and all those who supported this conference. So this year we come together under a powerful theme toward a resilient future for Canada, mobilizing science, knowledge, and innovation. This 17th CSPC comes at a pivotal moment as our country faces challenges of enormous scale and complexity. So the question before us is this: how do we mobilize science, innovation, and knowledge to build truly resilient systems in our economy, in our communities, and our environment? We all believe that science and innovation are the foundations of resilience, our ability to adapt, to recover, and to thrive in uncertain times. Our discussions this week touch very core of national strategies. How can we better integrate industrial, defense, and innovation strategies for a stronger and more productive economy? How can we ensure that investments in research and development translate into tangible resilience in all sectors? And how can our global engagement, our diplomacy, trade, partnerships amplify Canada's innovation leadership on the world stage? Our country is being called to think differently and build at a speed and scale unlike anything before. This means new frameworks, new ways of translating knowledge into action. This means bridging research and real-world impact, mobilizing science for resilience and economic development and growth. To do that, we must be bold, embrace risk, welcome novel ideas, interdisciplinary work, and unlikely collaborations. Measure the impact differently, not just for academic output, but also social impacts. As we move through panels, workshops, and hallway conversations, I invite you to carry 3 commitments with you. First, challenge the existing norms. Ask, is there a new way of doing things instead of this has been done always this way? Second, think for future orientation. How can we make Canada to succeed this moment? And the third, how science and innovation, as the pillars of our economy, can contribute to the existential challenges of our own country. In this time, the role of science and innovation policy cannot be secondary. It must be central. It must be bold, and it must shape our future. Let's make this conference a forge for the ideas that will help and shape policies and strategies for Canadian science and innovation ecosystem. Merci beaucoup. Now it is my utmost pleasure to introduce the first plenary session of the conference. It is our honor to present the discussion around the most important report on science and innovation policy in Canada. The Council of Canadian Academies published the report just yesterday. As you know, this is the most important, most comprehensive report on STI in Canada. The last report was 2018. Prior to that was 2012. Now we are all excited to hear discussions from the expert about this report. And what a week for CSPC. 2 weeks ago, we had the budget. 2 days ago, we had the budget vote. Yesterday, CCA report. We seriously were thinking to increase the registration fee for this. But we didn't. You're here, no worries. We don't charge you extra for this retreat. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Tej Kritzberg, the President and CEO of Council of Canadian Academies, to open the panel and discussion. Thank you.
Terrific. Good afternoon to everyone. Bienvenue à tous et merci Meredith pour l'introduction. C'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui avec tout le monde. L'année dernière, lors de cette conférence, le thème général était celui de la responsabilisation, de la valeur transformative de la science, du savoir et de l'innovation. Such change a year can bring. This year, as Meredith mentioned, the theme is resilience, defense R&D, sovereignty, research security. But you know, what hasn't changed, of course, is the importance of Canada's science, technology, innovation efforts to all of the discussions that have been taking place. And as this audience knows, it is to the science and technology innovation ecosystem that we turn when we are seeking to improve our prosperity, our productivity, our competitiveness, but also to adapt to change and to solve some of our societal problems. Just 2 nights ago, my tax was recognizing researchers who were doing just this. They were developing tick repellents to stem the flow of disease and identifying language assessment identifying language disorders in children, new assessment tools for language disorders in children. But now the system is more important than ever, given the pressures now facing Canada. So then, how are we doing? How are we doing in science, technology, innovation? And this is the question that we are looking to answer today. And we have just the right people here for this purpose. With us is Karim Bardisi, Member of Parliament from Tycon, Parkdale, High Park, and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Welcome, Karim, and you can come and have a seat here. There you go. And with us is Ilse Trunek, Chair of the CCA Expert Panel on the State of Science, Technology, and Innovation, and long-standing leader in Canada's STI ecosystem. Welcome, Ilse. So, before we get into the discussion and questions, I am going to run through some report findings on behalf of the panel. And of course, if I don't get the messaging quite right, I've got Ilse here to correct me. But in doing this, I have the delightful task of summarizing a 250-page report in 5 slides. So this is like TikTok version rather than Reader's Digest. And so I am aspiring here only to inspire all of you to read the report. And on your tables, there's a little flyer here and a little QR code in the top corner, and you can access the report in French and English through that. So with that, let's get through, let's start on the presentation. Call up the presentation here. There we go. So now the report is the work of a panel of experts who have spent over a year in conversation, reviewing and contesting and making sense of the vast evidence on this topic, all with the goal of answering this question: what is the state of science, technology, and innovation in Canada, and how does Canada compare internationally? To which we thank ICID as lead sponsor for referring this to the CCA. And next slide. Oh, I have the ticker, don't I? There we go. Yes, and here is the panel to whom we owe thanks. The 14 members brought brought to the conversation diverse expertise from across the country and internationally. And this expertise was then supplemented with input from another 14 peer reviewers, along with a series of commissioned papers made possible with support from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. And of course, many of the folks here are in this room. We've got panel members and peer reviewers here. Yeah, they're all here to help answer any of the questions you have on this report. Now, as some of you know, and I think Meredith mentioned, this is the fifth in a series of reports on this very subject going back to 2006, with the last report published in 2018. And this year, the panel pushed into new areas, in particular with finance and startups, and have made use of new data sources, including in the area of bibliometrics. And here on the slide are the main topic areas covered by the chapters. And if I can summarize this report in one sentence, it is that many of the indicators in each of these topic areas are trending in the wrong direction. And it has reached a point where the panel believes that maintaining Canada's standard of living is at risk. So, with that, let's look at research performance. The performance of Canada's higher education sector is a rare bright spot in the STI system overall. Canada continues to perform well, maintaining its international standing despite growing competition and heavy investments from new international players. Research outputs are high and impactful in a comparative context, with growing strength from 2018 in areas such as ICT, clinical medicine. And we continue to have research institutions that are among the best in the world, with strong clustering of performance in key regions of Canada. We also have a strong talent base, with one of the most highly educated populations in the world, and we are also seeing a growth in R&D personnel, again, since 2018. But the data also shows that Canada's most promising talent is leaving, with current system not adequately supporting the careers of promising graduate scientists and scholars. Now, innovation performance. So here, Canada's performance continues to deteriorate. There has been an overall decline in innovation among firms, a decline not only in the proportion of firms that introduced innovation, but also a decline in those that undertook innovation activities. And it's a trend that cuts across nearly all industries. R&D expenditures in business is low and declining when compared to our OECD counterparts. And the panel also flags a slowing of technology adoption. In the first quarter of this year, only 18% of Canadian firms indicated that they plan to invest in advanced technology, continuing a decline from 2017. And the most commonly cited reason for not using advanced technologies were, by a large margin, is that they were not viewed as applicable or necessary for the business. Now, As for obstacles to carrying out innovation, most significant and persistent by firms are uncertainty and risk and the lack of skills. So, what about patents? The panel did find that Canada is experiencing growth in patenting, but at a slower pace than the global average, and with continued significant outflow. In other words, what is being created in Canada is not being retained in Canada. So, and while Canada has a strong base of startups, domestic financing is limited, which results in firms seeking out foreign investors and helping contribute to the outflow of IP. On a positive note, there is some good news with SMEs, which have been significantly increasing their R&D expenditures in recent years. So, now on my final slide here, I offer a few of the panel's key takeaways resulting from reflections on their years-long conversation. Here, they're emphasizing the severity of the problem. As noted, the indicators are trending in the wrong direction. Canada is not transferring upstream strengths and research and talent into downstream economic benefits. And also, there's a real urgency here, especially in the context of our productivity challenges and our Canada-US relations and AI. But, always an opportunity and for industry here to aggressively adopt AI and for the government to enhance the focus and foster key areas of strength. So I'm going to stop there. Again, by all means, have a read. These slides, by the way, will be available in both languages with us at CSPC after this presentation. So we're going to turn to conversation with Corinne. And, I'm going to need to take a mic.
And we're going to, there we go. And we're going to start with some opening comments. And over to you, Karim. Give us some thoughts here.
Thank you. Thanks so much to all of you for being here today. As mentioned, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry, with a bit of focus on science and research, and also the MP for Otayakan, Parkdale High Park in West Toronto. And this, as Mayor Dad mentioned, this comes at a very opportune time. There's probably, there are very few moments that have been as exciting for science policy and the connection between scientific research and our economy as it has been, as we've seen the last couple of weeks. I just want to share a bit of the policy context in government that came a bit before this report and has now come since this report has been finalized. And as you see in the report, and as mentioned, the government investment in and higher education investment in R&D has been quite significant, and we thought it was really important to make a special effort to do a step change, frankly, which we did in the 2024 budget, and to retain those gains in the 2025 budget. And as you know, that was mostly funding through to the Tri-Council agencies. And those choices, the choice to make that investment in 2024 and all the way through the continuum, and I know there's a lot of graduate students or former graduate students in this room, and you know how important those fellowship increases have been for your lives, and then all the way through to the much more larger projects and all the other kinds of projects funded by the other agencies. Really significant choice made by the government in 2024, and an additional choice to retain those gains because the context has changed dramatically between 2024 and 2025. It's not a context that's entirely captured in this report, but I think this report is a good hinge point or good leverage point to show the urgency that is related in the report. So as you know, between 2024 and 2025, we had a new US administration that launched a trade war against us and launched significant trade actions across the world. And that has had economic sectors, that has had researchers, that has had people up and down in our country and our society, from those who are completely disconnected from science and science policy to those who live this on a daily basis. Our economy is being upended by the unjustified tariffs that have been levied against us. You probably know a bit about how our government and how other governments have responded. But the result of that is the need to look anew at the endowments, at the things we've been doing, the things we've been depending on in our economy, and to say, what is it that we can no longer take for granted? And clearly this trading relationship, which in is responsible between 70 and 80% of our exports in most years, is one that we can no longer take for granted, and we have to diversify. You know, you experience those relationships in all kinds of other ways if you have collaborators in the United States, and you know that as a result, the other part of the context here is the context of the attack on science, especially in the United States, and I would add social sciences and humanities, of course, as part of that. And so the other piece of context is we have to diversify and we have to attract talent. And you saw in the budget a very significant set of moves, the biggest in the among any OECD country that we've seen, $1.7 billion commitment, again, all the way through the continuum to attract new talent that will be anchored and supported by some new research dollars while maintaining the gains in the 2024 budget. So that's a series of choices. Those were choices that this government made positively for science, for talent, that we think will have lots of downstream benefits that will take years to realize. This report shows a certain set of urgencies that I know Ilse will talk about more in a moment, and I'll in the conversation I'll definitely make a bridge between what's in the report and the context that I've shared.
Thanks, Karim. Over to you, Ilse.
Thanks very much, Tace, and thanks, Karim. Let me just see, I think on behalf of the panel, we are very delighted to see the report out in the world. It's been in a dark data room for the last 18 months, and it's really great to see it now as a basis to inform where we go from here. And so I just want to start by saying it's been a real pleasure to work with the outstanding CCA team, to work with a thoughtful and dedicated and extremely hardworking panel, many other contributors that Tace already mentioned. Big thank you to the sponsors, and I also just want to thank Mirdad and the CSPC for making room for this conversation here today. So just to build on the context that both of you said, I think it is important to just remind ourselves that this report was commissioned in the late spring of 2024. It was just after our senior deputy governor of the Bank of Canada referred to our productivity crisis as an emergency. It was before the US election, it was before the Canadian election, it was before ChatGPT became all of our best friend and the best friend of everybody else in the world. And so the panel held this tension of delivering on the charge, which is a charge to continue to track trends over time. So do some of the same work that appeared in prior iterations with similar data sets, but also particularly in the narrative, because as Karim mentioned, the data of all this change is not yet reflected in the current version, to at least reflect how that changing context shifts, and to make sure that the report doesn't land with a thud, feeling like it is completely contextually irrelevant. So that was a tension that we were held, walking this line between hard data, doing the best job we could to put the best data forward, but at the same time capturing the changing context. So the end result is a report that I think is rich in information. As you know, the CCA does not make recommendations, but we try to interpret the data in the best way possible. But it is a snapshot in time. And what that snapshot in time tells us is that some of our long-standing issues on a lagging innovation performance continues, and in many key metrics has declined further. Others are simply doing more and adapting to change in the world faster. And what that means is at this moment in time, facing a very turbulent external environment and a set of new threats, we are with a weak hand. And that's the reality. And if I take off my panel hat for a moment to not embarrass Tace and the CCA, my simple observation from this dark data room, 18 months in a dark data room, is we simply can't navigate this crisis, the storm we're in, without a better set of analytical tools to analyze in real time what is changing, to get the right real-time data on key issues that are emerging, to do deep dives on those issues, because the pace of change is just simply too fast. And to put it bluntly, it would be irresponsible to wait another 6 or 7 years for the next STIC report to appear to tell us whether the interventions we're making in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years were the right ones.
Thank you, Ilse. Yeah, that's well. I hope we can act on that. That's good. Okay, so I've got a few questions here, and we're going to start on research performance. My first question is for Ilse, but you know, the report finds that the research system is a bright spot. As mentioned, we're punching above our weight. We're producing top talent. But you know, the competition is increasing here. You know, we've got a lot of competition from high growth countries like China, India, and Russia. So tell us what stands out to you about Canada's research capacity, and how serious are the challenges to maintaining our competitiveness?
I would say absolutely the broad bucket of talent, research, our higher education system is without any doubt a bright spot on the innovation landscape. And it is not to be sneezed at, because this is the foundation of a thriving STI ecosystem. And we cannot understate how important this piece of the puzzle is. But it is not smooth sailing generally. So we know we have a highly educated population. We know we develop and we attract extraordinary graduate students. Many of them are in this room. We also know we lose them between postgraduate training and the market as they go into employment to better opportunities elsewhere. We know we punch above our weight in research output. 0.5% of the world's population, 3.9% of research publications, 4th on citation impact. This is all very important. And yes, that output is growing, but it is growing for us and for other industrialized nations at a much slower pace as the output of countries like China, Russia, and India. What that means is the research landscape globally is changing, and changing very, very rapidly. So we have to ask ourselves what those numbers will be 5 years from now. We also know that Canadians collaborate. 50% of our publications are with an international collaborator, and that should be a significant advantage for us compared to 44% globally. But that world's also changing because of the changes in the funding machinery in the United States, which is our largest collaborator, and because of rising concerns around research security. And some of our significant collaborators, China, Iran, are on that list of security concerns. So that piece is also a challenge. And then we come to, we look hard, of course, at the expenditures in these different sectors. We come to HERD, higher education, research and development spending, where we are still maintaining our position above the OECD average. But that number does require a further look, because as we know from the Fundamental Science Review and the Bouchard panel, not all countries measure HERD in exactly the same way. And we know that the business model of higher education in Canada relies very, very heavily on student fees for both research and operations. And so the recent pressures on international students further destabilizes that funding model. And as I mentioned, that is not yet visible in the data that we could report on. But that is a really, really important piece to keep an eye on, and we can't be complacent around that, because our data only goes to 2022, and we know that picture has changed quite a bit since 2022. So I think, in short, taste, the research environment and the talent environment, foundations of an STI ecosystem, has been remarkably resilient despite international competition and despite internal pressures. But I would say we cannot for a moment sit on our laurels and assume that will continue into the future.
Thank you. Now, Karim, in economically challenging times, governments have often looked to the research system for answers and increasing, for example, mission-driven research at the expense of investigator-led research. Now we are in these times, and what is the government's view as to the appropriate balance, say, between investigator-led research, mission-driven research, and might we expect a change on this front?
Yeah, and I want to pick up on the comment around the higher education punching above its weight and well represented here, and as you know, significantly funded by the federal government to do that work. And I think we should be, we need to keep hearing from you on this, but I think we've made a choice that it's both and, that it's basic and fundamental as well as applied. And there's some other strengths that I think are maybe not as captured in some of the data, but I think are real strengths in Canada. That diversity of research, both in larger institutions and smaller institutions, the fact that we have strong diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that have stood the test, some of the tests more recently, and are resulting in real research benefit, that there's actually an applied benefit, and that there's insights that we get because we have those lenses and those policies. And any one of these could be questioned. You could say, actually, in an area of constrained resources, we are only going to focus our resources on the most research-intensive universities at the expense of. You could say that, at a time of constrained resources, that DEI is a luxury. You could say that the college enterprise, which I know is small as represented in the data, should be even more marginalized. And so I think you're seeing in the overall policy approach that this is a both and that includes the interest in mission-driven work, and there are maybe folks in this room who are beneficiaries or participants in projects through one of the many acronymed organizations or projects, CERCs, CFREFs, and others. And I think in some cases it's early days, again, to realize the benefits or to assess the benefits and the impacts of some of those programs. In some it's not, and we do need to one of the, I think, the foundational pieces that is worth taking away from this is to look at those programs in comparison to what this report is saying, and to understand whether we need to layer on some policy objectives with respect to mission-driven research that we have not yet layered on. I think that is a good question to ask. It is still on the federal government a fairly light touch, is my impression or my understanding about the way mission-driven research is funded. And so we have been able to, and it's been a choice to say both and, but usually when you say both and, it's hand-waving and you kind of cut both. But I think that the numbers show that we have maintained and grown in as many of the areas as possible. In some cases, yes, it is catch-up funding. And then the other part of your question is around what questions are we seeking to answer with this mission-driven research. And I think there, frankly, there is more of a role for connectivity between the academy, people who are playing key knowledge translation roles, and government. This venue is a very important venue, and I hope to have, consider it my enjoyment to you that I will bring more of my colleagues here next year, as long as it's in Ottawa, during the week that the Parliament is sitting. Meredith, we'll work on that together. Que c'est important de le faire d'inviter les francophones dans cette entreprise. Vous avez noté peut-être dans notre manifeste de l'élection qu'il y avait quelque chose de spécifique concernant la recherche en français. Et c'est quelque chose qui est important, non seulement pour les gens au Québec, non seulement au Nouveau-Brunswick, mais partout au Canada, qu'il y a les gens qui font ce genre de recherche. And I think to the point around the moment that we are in, there are many questions that research, that mission-driven research needs to address, because we are all in a moment now on a bunch of policy questions or a bunch of questions around the innovations that we think are going to be the next sources of economic growth or well-being for Canada. As strong as the research enterprise is, in particular in higher ed, we know that there are questions that we need to answer. And I think it's a very, very valuable conversation. I'll just end my comment on this point, and I know there are projects like Science Meets Parliament, but just keep in mind you have 343 MPs in Canada. Most of them are agnostic or positive about science and scientific research. There's a few who find it politically valuable to beat up on research to beat up on science as a politically advantageous thing. But they would not necessarily know that there is such a community here because they see, they might see it as people who are over there. They might see research as something that is related to a part of your life. If you're an undergraduate and you might have some connection to a professor. But the exposure has to be at multiple levels. And so when you're thinking about where you live or your hometown, what is your connection back to your hometown and the kinds of insights, the kind of work that you do that makes your hometown proud and therefore would have an interest in from your local MP? Because there's actually a connection between that and your question. You know, we have many communities, large and small in Canada, and many demographic groups that are really struggling with real problems. The one that comes to mind to me that and I used to spend a lot of time on it at the dais at Toronto Metropolitan University, was misinformation, disinformation. It's something that touches every community and every demographic group in multiple ways in Canada. And I know in this room there are some people who work on that directly, and there's a number of you who are the public face of science, the public face of your work, and you represent it through whatever modern means available, whether it's the short form video, 15 seconds or less, or whatever. And so we need you to be communicating that work, because there's actually a bridge between that and the biggest questions we are trying to answer. Because if we don't, the online world will happily be filled by people who are doing mission-driven research, i.e. they have a big answer to a big question and it is completely unscientific. And so that's just an encouragement to this group. And perhaps there's some panels on this, but I just wanted to make sure I said that as part of that.
Thank you. Any reaction to Karim's test? No, good. Okay, next question on innovation performance. So, what are we going to do about innovation here in Canada? The panel has now reviewed the evidence, and for all their work, they've come to a conclusion that we've heard before, that Canada's innovation is in a poorly state, despite many efforts over many years, many programs. And so, Ilse, maybe can you speak to what data you think underscores the crisis were the best in innovation, and are there any positives that you can speak on?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of measures, and actually this report, compared to previous STIC reports, has very intentionally tried to sort of focus a bit more on the innovation side of the equation, where the data is a little bit more messy and a little bit more challenging, but that was intentional. But I would say there are two primary data sources that tell the story. And the first is around the expenditures on R&D in the business sector, so-called BIRD, which we know over a long period of time has been in decline in Canada. And we've now become so used to that message that we almost brush over it. So I thought I would give you some real numbers. So in Canada, BIRD accounted for 59% of national R&D spending in 2023. And by contrast, BIRD averaged about 75% of R&D spending in the OECD countries. And Canada's BIRD intensity fell from about 77% of the OECD average in 2000 to only 57% in 2023. And although we saw an uptick sort of in the 2017 to 2021 period, which seemed optimistic, the OECD average increased in that period even higher. So we didn't close the gap. And there's a lot of discussion about the reasons for this, and there's no question that our industrial composition contributes. We have more companies in perhaps part of the economy where R&D intensity is not as important, or dare we say it, in regulated sectors where they perhaps have less competition. But it doesn't fully explain the lagging bird. But that is one factor. The second factor, which is really important, is that we lack a significant number of large R&D intensive firms, which sort of drive that overall expenditure numbers. And our R&D intensity in the business sector is much more concentrated in small firms, smaller and medium-sized enterprises. And when you look at the numbers compared to the US, it's quite striking. So if you look at the percentage of R&D that is performed by small and medium-sized firms, so less than 250 employees in Canada, that number is about 55% of all BIRD. If you look in the United States, those small firms only contribute about 11% of BIRD. And if you flip the equation for employees more than 500 employees, so larger firms, in Canada they contributed about 36% of BIRD, and in the United States they contributed 85% of BIRD. So obviously our SHRED program targets more small and larger firms, but that's the reality of our industrial composition as well. And the third dimension is the very significant shift we've seen from manufacturing to services. So if you look back historically to 2000, you see BIRD was almost entirely concentrated, 70% in our manufacturing sector, and that in 2023 was down to about 24%. And that has shifted, inversely for services. So it was about 28% in 2000, and that number is now over 70%. So, and we have not replaced that R&D intensive manufacturing sector with whatever the new version of manufacturing is in Canada. And that's not a unique challenge for Canada, but it is a reality. So there are reasons, but however way you look at this, the declining BIRD and the declining BIRD in recent years is a real area of concern. The second layer of data, which I think is very significantly captured in this report and for the first time captured, is through StatsCan's new SIB survey, which is the Survey on Innovation and Business Strategy, which in its current form was implemented in 2015. And the way it works is it collects data for 2 years, then it reports, then it collects again, and so on. So we've had now a sequence of 3 reports. And they span sort of 2017, and the last report was in 2024. So it's very, very recent data. And it's based on the Oslo manual. It is comparable to the methodologies used in Europe, so it's useful from that perspective. But when you look at that data where the survey directly asks firms about their innovation activities and the frequency with which they indulge in those innovation activities and what kind of innovation activities and it's very recent data. The numbers, again, are a little concerning because what we see is that if you ask them about introducing new innovations, that's down from 80% in 2017 to 72% in 2022. Undertaking innovation activities down from 60% in 2017 to 47% in 2022. And again, the obstacles they cite is uncertainty, risk, lack of skills. And then on the technology development and adoption piece, which is so intertwined with our productivity crisis, you see that it is a sizable activity, but surprisingly small. 2017, 32.7% firms said that they are developing or adopting new technologies, and that has dropped to only 19% by 2022. And as Tace mentioned, the main reason is they don't see it as relevant for their business. And if that was true in 2022, I think we have to ask ourselves, is that still going to be true in 2027? On the positive note, I just want to say there is some very, very promising data on a growing segment of the SME population that is highly R&D intensive and scaling and growing. The frustration we had is that we just didn't have a robust enough data set to really understand the nature of that population of SMEs. But that means that some of the work we've been doing to grow that ecosystem is starting to pay off. And obviously, from a policy perspective, we have to do absolutely everything we can to make sure those firms grow as big as possible and become global market leaders, still anchored in Canada.
If we were underperforming in R&D, but our technology adoption numbers were high, that would be okay. Yeah. If our tech adoption was low, but the R&D was competitive, that would be okay. And the problem is the two together, which we were able to get away with. We simply cannot anymore. There was one stat that jumped out at me, and at the dais we used to do a lot of technology adoption research at my old think tank, and I know they still do that work. And so the answer to the question, reasons for not adopting or using advanced technologies, this is from page 150 of the report, not applicable to the business's activities. The answer, around under 40% answered yes, so that was the reason in the 2017 survey. Not applicable to the business activities, 40%, just under 40% in the 2017 survey. In the 2022 survey, it was almost 70%. So of those that were not adopting advanced or using advanced technologies, so you've already sheepishly admitted to the surveyor that you are not adopting the technology, and you're asked why, not applicable to the business activities. And so in this moment, in this context where the very structure of our economy is going to be changing as a result of this disruption of the trade routes, and of our that answer, it might still feel like the correct answer, but it's not going to be evident out in the world. Oh, and that's the national emergency system that we're all testing today.
Yeah. Technology adoption in real time.
All right, it works. But there's other good news. There's other good news. And at Industry Canada, I said we never want to pick amongst our children, but I'll pick one of our children here a little bit. So I don't know if there's any current people in this room. Just raise your hand. Oh yeah, we're going to have a little bit of this. Raise your hand if you are in or have been through a MyTax program. Okay? Let's see, higher. We really need to see. Okay, pretty good. Pretty good. We need those bridges, those translators. Put your hand back up if it was a good experience. Okay, MyTax itself says 98% say it's a good experience. I don't know if the survey gets, I know the survey does a really good job of finding those intermediaries, finding those programs that do bridging, and we know that in other countries, they have a better structure for doing this. That there's direct pipelines of potential innovators. Maybe those of you who were or are associated with MyTax didn't know that you had an innovation, that you were an innovator, until the way that program works invites you in. And I know MyTax is not the only example. I know there's Lab to Market. I know there are other examples. And I know there are incubators and accelerators that are sometimes attached to universities that can invite people in that if they didn't necessarily know they had that potential. And so I don't have much more to say except to say on this point, except that from a policy and a funding perspective, we have continued to and made some certain choices about what we'll fund on this. It is a bigger policy issue, and then probably the biggest policy choice that has some relationship to this set of issues was an improvement on what we think is an improvement to SHRED to allow companies to pre-qualify and to increase the amount of funds that would be available. But looking at this, the report and looking at the comparative data, it doesn't seem to me that this problem is one for government alone to solve, that this is something that we can play policy supports. And just back to the earlier question about research. So government has now made a set of decisions around research. We've now made some tweaks and changes, especially on the tax side and on innovation policy. it will be very important for us to get that more live feedback. And there are some innovative data methods, I think, that are available to us in the mix of other things that are happening in the economy to get that live feedback about how these are landing on the ground. I suspect this is more of a research audience than a business audience, but we need you pushing the doors down. We need you pushing the doors down. And again, it's not just hard science, it's not just manufacturing. Every sector represented in this room has the potential, I believe, to bring their knowledge into an economically beneficial arrangement with a company, with a not-for-profit, with government that can help advance prosperity.
And just to highlight again the facts, which is the point of this report, is Canada's level of bird funded by the government is higher than the OECD average. About 6.5% of bird in Canada was funded by the federal government in 2022, compared to the OECD average of 4.5%.
Great. Okay, last questions around financing startups and scale-ups. And this was, of course, a new focus of the report here. And so, Ilse, we've got a strong startup base in Canada, but we struggle to scale them, which we know, and that shows up in a range of metrics, right? Be it lower bird levels due to smaller firms, or negative patent flows that result from Canadian firms being bought out by international companies. Can you walk us through the state of our financing for startups, and what are the trends, and where are you seeing any green shoots, if any?
Yeah, so this is the first time, as you mentioned, that we've included a focus on financing startups, and the reason is, of course, recognizing that only a small subset of firms receive angel or venture capital or private equity funding, but they tend to concentrate in the science and technology intensive firms, often the high potential firms. So we felt it was important to understand more about that. It is a first data investigation. There's absolutely quite a bit more to do, but there are a few things we learned, we see from this. Venture capital, for example, is always highly concentrated in certain places, Silicon Valley obviously being legendary in that sense. But in Canada, it is actually more concentrated than elsewhere in our largest cities. So that is one factor. In fact, recent data from the CVCA underscores that even more. So networks are important. We had a peak of venture capital in 2021. It's been a tough venture market since then. And so where a lot of the focus in the sort of 2020, 21 was on, we have to open up more capital for scaling firms. A gap has now opened at the seed and pre-seed stage, which I think impacts a lot of companies that are spinning out of academic centers at the moment. Then the second layer is, if we look at this cohort of scaling firms, these promising SMEs that have received venture funding, the data tells us that many of these promising firms, because of limited availability of venture capital in Canada, seek capital internationally, predominantly from the United States. This is to be understood. This is a good thing. Those sources of capital often help these companies access talent, access customers, grow and scale in that very important market. The thing that's a little bit different when you look at it as a collective, when you look at that bundle of firms that are now our most promising firms, and you look at who owns them today, they are majority owned by the United States. In fact, Canadian investors are small in those firms. So if the light is now on sovereignty, the question is, can we perform without owning our resources? And that is a very important strategic question. The other piece that I think is very tangible for this audience is, if we look at the trends in venture capital over time, it has largely concentrated in the ICT sector. And that flywheel is going now. There are more and more funds, more serial entrepreneurs who are coming back, backing new companies and so on. So that piece is working, but we still have structural funding gaps in areas such as life sciences and deep technology that are more capital intensive, perhaps slower to develop, but that align really strongly with our research excellence. And so those are gaps that we need to fill. And so it's not surprising, I think, Tace, that there is such a hot debate today in Canada about what is the role of our financial institutions, our banks, our pension funds, in participating and investing more in our innovation economy. Because there's no question, if you look at the growth of venture capital in the United States, it took off after the pension funds came in. And so what is the role at this moment in time for us to mobilize more Canadian capital so that we can own a bigger piece of our winners?
Ouais, je vais répondre en français pour cette question-là. La question du financement, c'est très important. Nous avons ajouté dans ce budget de nouveaux fonds dans les financements dans l'espace venture. Comme Elsa a dit, il faut diversifier les fonds. Le Québec fait un très bon travail là-dessus, surtout dans la biologie et les sciences concernant la santé. Et c'est quelque chose que je pense que c'est au moins un petit peu inspirant pour les gens hors du Québec de voir ça. Et les fonds de financement public comme la Caisse est très impliquée. L'autre chose, c'est que Elsa a mentionné le financement privé. Le Bureau de concurrence fait une étude maintenant à propos du financement aux PME. Et je pense que ça serait très intéressant de le voir parce qu'on entend souvent des PME que le financement des banques, c'est pas très disponible. On utilise aussi the Business Development Bank of Canada comme un outil pour donner l'appui aux PME. Et je vais juste ajouter une autre politique, ce n'est pas directement à propos du financement, mais nous savons au Canada que c'est très important que les PME et les startups ont accès à l'approvisionnement du gouvernement et des gens qui achètent des services et les produits. Et nous entendons juste trop souvent que notre première vente a été aux États-Unis. Nous avons ce produit-là. Vous avez investi dans ce produit parce que vous avez investi dans mon recherche, parce que j'ai reçu des fonds d'un programme de l'appartement de défense ou des ressources naturelles. Vous avez déjà subventionné ce travail, mais maintenant, quand c'est le temps de vendre quelque chose à vous, c'est la porte est fermée. Alors, nous avons annoncé en septembre un des programmes les plus ambitieux que moi j'ai vu et je l'ai suivi. Ça fait 20 ans, cette politique publique à propos de l'approvisionnement. Moi, je pense que notre politique Buy Canadian, c'est très ambitieux. Il y a beaucoup de détails à confirmer. Mais je le dis juste pour vous dire que cette porte-là, on essaie de la lancer ouverte pour tout le monde ici.
Merci. Et je pense que nous avons à peu près 10 minutes pour la question. Alors, yep, go ahead, 10 minutes for questions or so.
Thanks so much. My name is Marc Nantel. I'm the Vice President of Research, Innovation, and Strategic Enterprises at Niagara College. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Thank you for the conference, Merdad. Reading the report, you sometimes think, oh, so it's similar to other reports, and the direction is similar, and maybe even accelerating. But I'm really warmed up by the fact that the SME bit is a bright star in the report, that SMEs are doing more research, commercializing more, and well, that's what colleges do. We work with SMEs, mostly. Pretty much all of our companies with which we work are Canadian SMEs, and we help them develop new products, processes, services, and commercialize them. So I'm not going to ask the rhetorical question, why in heck then was the budget directed to universities the whole time? because good on them. They did a great advocacy job. Well done. But I'm going to focus on maybe the spring economic update. How can colleges ensure that the $109 million that we got in budget 2023 to help NSERC with our program that's ending in 2026 can be continued and or augmented, because some of the great stars that you've seen in your report are just not going to be able to accomplish what they do so well. What's the best way for us to get that message through?
Who would like to start?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Thanks so much for the question. And the point I made earlier about researchers or people being connected in the community applies very actively to the college sector. Can I do a raise hand thing again? How many people here are associated with the college sector? Okay, so that's a sign. I don't know if it's a sign to Mayor Dad, or if it's a sign to me, or if it's a sign to this community, because I think it's illustrative of the numbers. If you know the numbers in the report. You forgot to mention, by the way, that one of the benefits that you would ascribe to government, and I know you agree with, or I suspect you agree with, is that the IP then stays with that the IP is not then owned by the college, and there's perhaps some additional economic benefits because the IP sits directly with the SME. So clearly, we made a choice in this budget to make the investments that I described, and the last budget investments to be retained. The policy context that I know is that, and I was Premier Kathleen Wynn's and Dalton McGuinty's Director of Policy. I know this sector quite well, and I know what has happened to it, especially in Ontario. It is a real challenge, and it is the result of, yes, some federal policy moves, but some very specific, sustained provincial policy choices, not just in Ontario. I asked the question earlier about putting up the hands because earlier today, Leslie Church, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Jobs and Families, and we were both student leaders back in the day, I guess. We went to meet the CASA, the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, which is, I remember being there at the building of CASA 30 years ago. So maybe this is CSPC in 25 years. But CASA now has 9 college members, and they do joint advocacy on things that are related to what students need and want. And of course, that there's a key cost of living. There's a key student financial aid piece to that. CASA by the way, did a research advocacy piece. You can check it out. CASA is also concerned about graduate research. So it is easy for a government to respond to different sectors and play defense, play offense, say, yes, we'll do this with you. We want to hear from you. And we will continue to do that. And I met with Polytechnics Canada just in advance of just a few weeks ago. I think there is value to be had in the post-secondary sector doing more collective action. I know that in this sector that there are many attempts to make sure that you maximize or benefit on behalf of your institution, your sector, your class of institution, and that's fine, and that's something that every sector does. But if indeed we have the problems that are identified in this report, and if indeed we think that colleges, especially in more local economies, and I will just add that one of the challenges of productivity broad metrics is that they are not sectorally focused, that they are not regionally focused. We know that we have an especially large productivity challenge in the housing sector, for instance. And we think that actually technology adoption and local economic things, and maybe some of the research that's done by folks in this room, can actually benefit that productivity and make our housing sector more productive. Well, that's something that maybe requires more college and university alignment, as an example. I don't want to throw the question back at you, but just to note that we've heard it, that our MPs have heard it, and that we intend to be very engaged with the sector to work with them. I don't know the specifics on that program, but we intend to be very engaged.
Thanks. Ilse, anything to add? All right. We got time probably for one more question. Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
My name is Baljit Singh. I'm the Vice President Research at University of Saskatchewan. First of all, thank you very much, Elsa, to you and your panel for doing such hard work. I'm sure I'm one among large number of people who are grateful for this painstaking job you all have done. Thank you very much. I just want to add a couple of things to the discussion. Number one is we have been sliding on this scale for a long time. This issue of productivity has been there. If we look at the period for 15, 20 years, there was no increase in graduate student funding till the 2024 budget. There was no money added to the tri-councils from 2018 till 2024. So we have that slide in funding. My feeling is that actually all the concerns in the report, situation is worse than that. That doesn't capture the whole story. Thus, we as Canadians looked pretty good. Our publication record, our citations, till the rest of the world was very slow. When we look at Israel, South Korea, China, India, the speed of the change there is so much that the data which we are looking at from 2022, if you were to compare that today, I wonder our publication record citation, how will it look? My colleague there from colleges, I was going to make the same point. At the Bouchard report that I was a member of, one of the findings for us was the fragmentation of the Canadian innovation system. Here is a story where universities come to Ottawa to advocate for lots of money through tri-councils, but we do not give due consideration to polytechnics and the colleges as to the critical role they play in growing small and medium enterprises and their value. So point I'm taking towards is maybe there's not enough time right now. Are we looking at a culture of malaise and apathy that we are not? That is our rate limiting step in this country today, that we are so slow to think about a challenge or an opportunity that by the time we wake up, it's gone, or the situation has become even more worse. So again, sorry to add a little bit more pessimism to the story, but I'm a guy, very optimistic individual, but I wanted to add that.
I will respond optimistically. Again, the investments that were made and sustained in 2024 and in this budget, in an international comparative context and in a context where you compare within needs in Canada, it's a huge win. It's a huge win, and we need you to be out there celebrating these wins as much as possible and telling the stories of what is happening with your work and how it is landing in your communities, with your peers, with those international colleagues who are now interested in coming, who are perhaps more interested than ever in coming to Canada. We need you to be celebrating and telling those stories, because in the context of all the other choices that were available, this is a huge win, and I think it shows very, very clearly the interest and the commitment that Minister Joly and Prime Minister Carney have to talent and talent development. I think it is a very clear demonstration and a very clear commitment. I just want to make maybe a side comment on colleges and universities. My observation in this space is that those places where colleges and universities do the best collaboration is in communities where there's one of each. And so it's a very, they know their lanes and they're in a dialogue with each other a bit more intentionally. I could be wrong about that, but it's something I think is a good, and I know, in Ontario context, Hamilton and Peterborough, where there's a very clearly identified one university, one community college, and they have their respective roles and they're plugged in to workforce planning boards or whatever versions of those entities exist, or they're very plugged in that they're not running one sector council and then the other one is running its own sector council. I think those kinds of structures are very important. I'm sure everyone in this room already goes to too many meetings, but there are ways to have more live economic data at the local. This is not a labor market data report, but there are ways to be pulling more actively the labor market data that's out there, and to hopefully have universities and colleges work as nimbly as possible to design or co-design or separately design programs that meet the needs. Again, I know that's a point that's a little less research focused, but I think is an important part of the equation as well.
Great. Ilse, maybe you could give some sort of final words to the audience, some takeaways for them on this report, and yes, go for it.
Thanks, Chase. A lot has been said. You know, the short strokes on the report is it highlights yet again our strengths in talent and research, not to be taken for granted, foundational to a thriving STI ecosystem, and I know it's been a tough slog in this sector over the last couple of years, so I just want to highlight that again. The report also underscores, you know, long-standing challenges with some concerning declines in recent years on key metrics. It also shows green shoots of new growth, and those are incredibly important for us to nurture. But the thing that has really changed is that this report lands in a context that doesn't look anything like the context that got us here. And doing more of the same in the same way is not magically going to give us a different outcome. And I personally believe that this is not a problem government can fix on its own. And so for the Government of Canada, it has to work with all of its provincial and territorial partners, its community partners, the business sector, academe, civil society. And this is all hands on deck. And collectively, we have to put building Canada's innovation economy as our national priority. It has to make it on Prime Minister Carney's list. And we owe future generations this.
Thank you. Any follow-on to that, Karim?
No, I think the direction, you know, we are in a moment where we are feeling a new connection to our country. We are feeling a new call to be sovereign. And so the work that is shown that we need to do, and I believe that Prime Minister Carney and Minister Joly and our team at Industry Canada are seized with this. It is all in the context of being more sovereign. And let's connect that emotional feeling that we have right now, or that we've had in the past months, or that might be happening if you're watching some sports, or something that's happening in your life that says, oh, you know what? This is the country that has given so much to me, and I want to be part of making it better. Let's bring that feeling to the challenges that we work on in our work, and bring that forward. Because I think that there is that summoning of national spirit is going to force us, in combination with the circumstances, it's going to get us excited about some of the changes that we need to make.
Thank you. That was terrific. Terrific final messages. And, I think consider this the start of a conversation. We really hope that all of you here continue to talk about this and to think about how we can all move forward together. So thank you both, truly.